This Jean that I was talking about that we went and got into the X-Lax, she had a brother 2 years older than her or me, and he and I used to kind of pal around in the summertime. And this one-room schoolhouse where we went was on their farm, just probably 100 yards from their house. And John and I used to go up in the schoolyard and goof around up there during the summertime. And one day we was up there, and John, he could always think up some mischief to get into. He got me into more trouble. I always blamed it on him anyway. And he said, "You know what would be fun?" I said, "What's that?" He said, "We ought to go out there and drill a hole in the girls' outhouse just down below the seat. And then when some girl comes in there and sits down, we push a blade of that tickle grass in there and tickle her. Foxtail, you know." And I said, "Yeah," I said, "that would be fun." And so we went down to his place and got a bracing bit and drilled a hole back there. And then I kind of forgot about it, but John was starting high school that fall. And he was going to go to Corden to high school. Well, who was left to do the dirty work but me? Like I say, it kind of slipped my mind. But anyway, one day we was out at recess, and the teacher came out and rang the bell, and recess was over, and everybody takes off for the outhouses. And I was over not very far from the girls' outhouse, and I happened to think about us drilling that hole in there. So I walked around behind there, and of course the hole was still there. And this tickle grass, it was growing all over the place. And I pulled up a blade of that tickle grass and stuck it through that hole. And I heard some girl come running in there, and I timed it just right. And I pushed that tickle grass up there, and she let out a blood-curdling scream and went running out. Didn't even get her pants pulled up. And the kids all come running over there, you know, and including the teacher. And, "What's the matter? What's the matter? Something bit me. Something bit me." Every kid in school and the teacher was there, and here I was trapped behind the outhouse. And so I just stayed there. Some snoopy girl come around there, and she says, "Well, what are you doing back here?" And the teacher happened to be right behind her, and she says, "Yeah, what are you doing back here?" I said, "Well, I come back here, I thought maybe I could see whatever bit her." Well, when this girl let out that blood-curdling scream, she scared me about as bad as I'd scared her, and I forgot to pull that tickle grass back out of that hole. And the teacher saw that, and she reached over and pulled it out and looking at it, and I could just see the old wheels turning in her head. And boy, she lit into me. She really gave me a going over. She knew exactly what had happened. She said, "I'm telling your dad." Well, she didn't tell my dad, because if she had, I wouldn't have been here today to tell the story. All the kids was mad at me, even the boys. Nobody would talk to me for, 3 or 4 days. Well, then, of course, this John Krause's sister, she was there too, and she was mad at me, like everybody else. And she couldn't wait for John to get home from Gordon on Friday night to tell him what a dirty trick I'd pulled. And he beat it over to our place. He couldn't wait to get there, and he was telling me what Jean had told him. He thought that was so funny. And I was still almost in shock. I cussed him out a little bit for getting me into trouble. But it wasn't funny at the time. Especially when that teacher caught me. And when I was going to high school, I played basketball and baseball. Well, after basketball games, we'd have to walk home at night. A neighbor kid and I'd walk home together. And usually we could catch a ride down to this place we called Duck Valley, which was a dirt road. Well, if it was a little bit muddy, why, nobody would want to take us home. They'd just let us out there to gravel. And so I don't know how many times I walked up that road by myself. This other kid, he would get out a mile before I did. But there was a cemetery right there on this hill that right next to the road. And of course that was always a little eerie, walking by that cemetery at night. And when there wasn't any moon or any stars, or well, maybe a few stars, but no moon, it'd be just almost pitch black walking up through that Duck Valley Road. It was about a mile or maybe a little more up through there. And there's timber on both sides. And the only way I could tell where I was at was I would be walking on the ridge in the middle of the road. It was graded that way so that the water would tend to run off the sides. And I'd walk on that ridge, and if I'd get off that ridge, I'd know I was getting out of the center of the road, so I could always find my way to the center. And of course there was rabbits and stuff. Every little bit a rabbit would run out of the grass and scared me half to death. And there was hoot owls down there, and they would hoot, and then once in a while they would let out a scream. Sound just like a woman screaming, and that'd just make the chills run up my back. Then there was an old wives' tale that I'd always heard about Duck Valley. Well, there was a good-sized creek that run down across Duck Valley, and was called the River Jordan. And the bridge, we called it the Long Bridge. Now it don't seem like it's very long. But anyway, it was real rattly. You'd drive a car or ride a horse across it and the planks would rattle. But this old wives' tale was that every night, about midnight, a headless rider would come riding a horse down the Duck Valley Road from the north. And of course I was always walking north. But he'd come to that bridge and he'd never come across the bridge. He'd ride this horse down and disappear in the river. And nobody knew where he went, you know. But every night he would come down that road. And I knew that there wasn't anything to it, but that was always in the back of my mind. And the closer I'd get to that bridge, the more I'd think about it. And if I'd ever heard a horse or something coming down that road, I don't know what I would have done. But anyway, I spent a lot of nights walking up the Duck Valley Road with my hair standing straight up, I imagine. Another night, and it was colder than the dickens, and the snow was so deep we could only get a ride out as far as his road anyway. So we were walking across the field, and the snow was at least over our knees. And we came to a straw stack out there in the middle of the field from when they thrashed. And the animals, like the hogs or cows or anything, they would eat their way back into these straw stacks. And we come to this straw stack and we crawled back in there where there wasn't anything in there. It was nice and warm, and fell asleep. And we didn't wake up till the next morning. And we walked on home the next morning.